Welcome y'all to the Political Science Student Association. This is our last meeting for the semester. It is basically open mic. If you have something you want to talk about, just go for it. We're just kind of here to chit chat today and kind of end the semester off. So thank y'all for coming.
Okay, one last time, if you've never been here before, I'm going to pass around an attendance sheet in a few minutes. That'll verify your attendance. This is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. Encourage you to join that. And if you add a faculty name to the attendance sheet right next to your name, there's a space for it. I will contact that faculty member. Can't guarantee that they'll do anything about it or that you'll get any credit, but this at least will verify your attendance. So, what do we want to talk about? Who wants to talk about it? What issues have you got?
There's some big news happening the last couple of days.
Okay, go ahead.
We had the Epstein files get released supposedly, or not. They're not going to get. They're not. It's gonna be all redacted. We all know that. It's just I was more like asking like, what do you guys think is actually going to happen? Because there's no way that every person in the House and Senate voted to. Well, besides one guy. But everyone's like, yeah, we should release it without there being some heavy scrubbing of the documents. That's what I feel like, at least.
Yeah. So the law says that they would be released without redactions, but anything that's under an active investigation would not be released because it would harm any investigation. The problem now being, if you just put everything under an active investigation, or at least the really bad parts, then nothing gets released. So nothing's going to get released out of the Epstein files. And my conspiracy-minded brain, they're already gone.
Oh yeah.
They've been gone.
They're gonna, if they do get released, it's gonna be just all black lines. There's not gonna be anything on it, which is kind of unfortunate, but that's the way it works.
To add to that, I think I want to do a little more research on how this House Oversight Committee works anyway, because I think it seems like whether it was actually the goal of Republicans or whether that's what they're saying was their goal now that Trump has changed courses, I'm not sure. But the idea that I think just, it feels like there's like no in between. It's either like everything gets released with no redactions, and that seems like it seems like a concern for many people in the House. I don't know if it's like concern for themselves or what the deal is, but they seem to think that it would be irresponsible to just release everything at once without any redactions. And then what, the alternative is the whole thing is redaction. So yeah, I guess there's really no winning, but I don't think I expected a win either, so.
I think it'd be ridiculous to say that the people the Congress whom a lot of the American people suspect to be in these files and would be the same body deciding what gets redacted from them. I also don't see how it's problematic to release all the information. And I think it's funny that the people saying it's problematic are again the ones suspected of being in the files. How would it be, problematic? It would seem like it'd only be problematic for those who kind of deserve it to be a little bit problematic.
I agree. I think I don't know, there seems to be this impression that I've gotten, I couldn't even tell you like directly from where, but I do feel like people that didn't necessarily do like, especially like pedophilic acts were probably named in there, and I don't think that the average American has the ability to separate like, oh, okay, they're in it, that means that they did everything that Epstein himself did, you know what I mean? So I think that can be like just a bit of a snowball effect, just because
that, yeah.
Like the average American isn't going to separate it.
He was certainly more than just a pedophile on an island. I mean, he had lots of political connections, no matter how corrupt they are, that doesn't mean that that person was, engaging in that. But then I guess the choice is between two not perfect choices of, are we going to let potentially the people that are guilty of the most heinous crimes decide what gets redacted? or are we going to let the American people figure it out for themselves, even if they get it a little bit wrong? It's like, who is our responsibility more to? And I feel like because that they serve the people, that their responsibility is to prioritize the people over themselves.
Well, I was going to say about the point about how if the files do get released, that I just saw something that said the Epstein file bills lets Attorney General Pam Bondi withhold or redact materials on national security or active investigations, kind of like how you were saying. So yeah, they can just redact anything that they want. It seems like, again, so meaning that I don't think we're going to get anything. Again, as soon as I saw that. What was it? Legit, just one guy in the House vote no, and everyone else in the House voted yes, and then in the Senate, every person voted yes. I was like, yeah, there's something suspicious about this. There's got to be some sort of deal or something like that to know. And also, Trump all of a sudden being like, yeah, you can release them, or he backtracked him so fast. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's something that they know they're collaborating on, that it's not going to get fully released the way that we expect it to be released.
Another interesting thing that was released, there was suspicions of it, but then it was proven, was Epstein's connection to the Mossad, which makes you wonder, okay, maybe this wasn't just a guy. Maybe there's a reason that this man was friends with so many politicians, and what that has to do with Israel, I'm not quite sure. But the files showing his connection to the Mossad, I don't think those can be overlooked. When the owner of a pedophilia ring island that invited a lot of our American politicians, including our current president, to the island, has connections to a foreign intelligence agency, and then all of a sudden our government goes from not wanting to release it, even not swearing in a newly elected congresswoman from New Mexico to avoid releasing it, to all of a sudden practically unanimously releasing it. It makes me think we're not going to get anything of real value.
At least we know about Trump and Bubba.
Yeah. Again, is it not trying to sound weird, but was it Bill Clinton or was it the horse? Because I don't know what to believe, man. I've heard some crazy things the last few days.
The file says Bubba, and they don't know if that person was alleging that it was him or not. They just think that it's him, and so it kind of went around as a joke.
It's just still insane that that's just a remote thing that even happened in the emails. That seems a possibility.
I mean, one thing I have to say, I'm not really defending either one. I just look at everything with skepticism because of the generation we live in, where anything can be faked or anything can be hidden. It was asked if Putin had these photos, right? And if Putin has this crazy photo of, like, I don't know, this alleged act, I don't know, I think our public relations with Russia would be very different, where Russia would just basically get to do whatever they want. Putin's come out and said multiple times that he would have never invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump was still in office in 2020. So I don't know. I feel like without, I don't know. I just look at things with skepticism from both sides, you know, because obviously they're hiding a bunch of stuff, and I think both sides are guilty of that. And so I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that someone like Putin would have that kind of power and information over someone like Trump and not just walk all over him. You know what I mean? So
I think though, even if he has that, if he was there to have that information and whatever illicit photos, would that also mean that he was not also involved in whatever illicit actions and might also have photos of himself?
That already paid for him, or he knows someone.
Yeah, like it's
one big club and we're not a part of it. Every day that it seems, whether it's with, an assassination attempt or with a ring like this, or even back in 2016 with the allegations of ties to Russia, it always, the more you learn, the more you see that you're lied to with pretty much everything. It's kind of become a running joke when you see a a breaking news story that has anything to do with politics, you know that you'll be asking for the real answers like 10 years from now and probably won't even have them.
On kind of like a different topic. Federal funding has definitely changed a lot for like college students. I don't know if y'all have experienced anything this year for like Pell Grant and stuff, like how little people are going to be covered by Pell now, and also their change and stuff. I had to go to financial aid. I'm probably just complaining a little bit today, but I had to go to the financial aid office because I kept getting like emails about like apparently one of my classes not being covered. And I was like, why is it specifically a class?
CPOS.
CPOS was enacted, and they're no longer covering minors that aren't directly like required for your major.
Oh, let's make sure I'm not getting any emails.
Yeah, and basically the financial aid was like, yeah, pretty much most people are now advising students not to take on minors because it's not going to be covered. If you need financial aid, it's not going to count for your like hours or anything.
I'm not sure what the resolution of that is going to be, but there's all sorts of there are all sorts of things floating around. We were told at one point that minors are being eliminated. I don't think that's true, but it highlights the kind of information that's floating around, and I'm not sure where that's going to lead.
Especially like, I'm fairly okay because next semester is my last semester, so it is what it is. I'm still mostly covered by everything that I need to. But if someone, say, started like their freshman or sophomore year last year and then are going to have to go through another 1 to 2 years, what's the likelihood of them dropping their minor and basically having like classes that are not being put to use now, or not being able to like afford the classes that they need to finish out something that they started? I think it's just kind of crazy that like they weren't even doing like any kind of like grandfathering in of something.
So maybe more broadly on that, what opinions do you all have on both affordability for college and also just various regulations, what you're allowed to take, whether or not they're going to be minors or not? What are your opinions? Do you think it's getting more difficult? Have you heard from older siblings or parents as to whether it's easier now or harder now? What's your opinion?
I support CPOS on its face. The idea that, okay, well, the taxpayers are helping pay for your education because that makes you a net positive to society, helps you have a better life, helps you contribute more to society, it helps everyone. And so it's like a return on the investment. Whether or not you become a monetary return to society, everyone wants their people to be more educated. And if you say, hey, I'm 18, I don't have the money to fund an education, but I can learn, and I want to go learn this skill, or I want to go gain this knowledge so that I can go contribute to society and work. I support that, but I also support CPOS on its face because it's like, okay, we'll help you in gaining that degree, but I'm a political science major. If I just want to go take a couple organic chemistry classes just because they seem interesting to me, well, I should be able to do that, but I don't think that someone else should have to pay for that if that has nothing to do with what I will be contributing back to society. Now, as for minors, I don't see why, as long as you're completing the minor in its whole and that this is still part of what you're going to have, I guess, as a certification or as a degree and help you contribute further, I don't see why that shouldn't be a part of it. But the idea of CPOS, that it's like it's paying for you to get a degree so that you can go contribute to society. It's not paying for you to do things because you enjoy it. That's on you. I guess it's like the separation between what's valued to everyone and what's just valued to you should be paid for by you.
Other opinions?
It's kind of sad to say, but I think it's the reality of the situation. Like, yeah, if the government could pay for everybody's special interests, that would be fabulous, but I just don't think it's possible right now. But it would be nice, at least what you're talking about with being grandfathered in and stuff. I think it would be a little more acceptable to at least say for the people that are already in college, just because you can't, define it of like, oh, who's committed enough to their major or who's not committed enough to their minor or whatever. So I guess it would be nice if we could somehow incorporate those who came to college under the impression that they would be able to follow their primary interests and their special interests as well.
I think sometimes like it's also like a backup plan for a lot of people is like if they have like an added minor or they're going into like a very like specialized, so maybe it's not like necessarily directly related to their major, but if they're going into like a specialized option, having that minor can help. And also if they're wanting to go to grad school, having a very diverse minor can be like really great if you're applying for grad school. There's part of the reason why I even decided to do a minor in the first place was because I wanted something a little bit different in the portfolio to hopefully be like, please pick me and please give me a scholarship. Help.
That's, I mean, for forever, that's pretty much been a standard recommendation in advising is to consider things like that. You know, you want to go to law school, but you want to have, you want to go to law school, but you're interested in a particular type of law. So you take pre-law concentration, but you also take courses in sciences, which may not fit into your plan of study at all, but they may help you when you go to law school and you want to focus on a particular type of law that has some dealing with sciences or, you know, other fields as well. And so, I mean, that's a cause for concern now. Others? Other topics? Other interests?
Would you be able to, and it's just a quick thing, but I guess maybe a compromise that would have, is it possible to sort minors into related minors or unrelated minors? Like if, you know, if I want to go to law school, a minor in accounting or in criminal justice or things like that are an obvious related minor, that's an obvious field of law, versus a minor in, I don't even know enough to pick one that's, you know, a crazy far out example, but like underwater basket weaving, I guess is the joke. You know, things like that. That's a special interest of mine, but I think that, you know, the right to like someone else paying for that, I think it stops when it's no longer a net positive for society and now it's just the positive for you. So it's like the line between like, all right, we're gonna help you contribute, we're all better when everyone's better, but that's just on you. If you just want to take on that interest, at that point it's no different than going and taking a course outside of college and a hobby.
Who makes that decision though? I mean, should the state be deciding whether or not the courses you're taking are going to benefit society or just you?
I guess that's their responsibility, no, for the general welfare.
Okay.
I think that's something that would be really hard to do with political science is taking away from anything, because anything could be political. I know people that are wanting to go into law to do like medical law, which means like if they had like a biology minor, that would actually be pretty like pertinent for that. Or even like art, if they were going in for like political advertisements and stuff. They had their helping with like administrative or helping with campaigns, having an art background or even like a communication background or I'm forgetting the word for it. It's the one that does like the media stuff.
Well, content creation, basically.
Yeah.
Sure. Our department is going to be working with a student, for example, who's an English major and who's minoring in public administration and public service. And there's perfectly legitimate reasons for doing that.
And there's so many, like, a lot of political science majors also go into, like, the public administration minor because they're wanting to do, like, more, like, service politics.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be hard to separate the usefulness, especially if they're, like, actively wanting to do a minor in hopes to use that in the future, especially for further education. Upper graduate colleges, I was always told, look to see how many things you do. Are you in clubs? Are you in... do you have an extra like minor? Did you take extra classes? Did you do this, what were you like actively doing while you were in school? And to think that they also now see that as possibly being useless, even though if you're trying to go for further education, it is incredibly important. I think there's a hard line that could be drawn there to do that. I think in general, they weren't necessarily thinking about that, or even thinking about the fact that they don't want to fund fun classes. I think they just wanted to limit funding as much as they could for Pell and for federal aid, because they also limited you have to be a much lower income class to also apply for Pell than what used to be even a year ago. I think that they just wanted to limit funding for Pell in general and try and cut back as much as they could on college funding.
Yeah, I mean, I know I had that experience because, my family falls in the bracket of, you make enough to qualify, but you don't make enough where your parents can just send you to any college that you want. So there were colleges, I got into Tennessee, Auburn, and I really wanted to go to a larger college. But I went here because, Hope covers tuition, and I think my total payment to the college is $600 a semester. That's not a whole lot for college. And so versus, Tennessee or Auburn, I'd be paying $200,000 for a degree in political science, and I couldn't justify it. Especially when you add law school on top of that. Now you're about the average home price in the U.S. into an education, and so I just couldn't justify that. So I think definitely falling in the bracket where your parents make enough but not enough really to send you to the college that has your ideal degree, or your parents might make $1 million a year, but that doesn't mean that they want to help you pay for college. So are those kids being negatively affected by the assumption that their parents will pay for it?
Do you want to?
This is a little bit of a jump, but I see this, the taking away of funds is kind of a symptom of the broader attack on higher education. It feels like there has been a kind of a little bit of a cultural shift, especially within the Republican Party. I'm just gonna be blatant about it. That higher education, it's the woke education. I mean, just that's what it's been called. And so I think this the taking away of funding is also it kind of is a double policy goal. They want to decrease spending, but it's also kind of this attack on what they see as woke and disagreeing with their views. And I think in what we were talking about with trying to qualify who is able to make the decision on what is valid and invalid, I think it's kind of a dangerous step when we're looking at attacking education, or and it doesn't even matter what party, because if you do if we end up with a super woke religious party, or I don't know, president, we're playing what ifs here. They could take away funding for religious studies, and then you flip it around, and then you have far right, then you can take away gender studies, and it really is just, it's a dangerous game to play when we're this is kind of a libertarian stance, but when we're allowing the state to make decisions on what is right and isn't right, or worthy or unworthy.
Yeah, I don't want to play devil's advocate, but kind of two things here. So the democratic process, right? So I guess in that case, would you support a referendum? I don't know how it would be worded. It's a really hard thing to word. I guess you could go majors, minors. You could go, or you could. There are some, I guess, multiple choice options of what do the people of each state want to send their tax money to, to the other people in the state. I guess voting with your money. And then on the flip side of that, I'm a person of faith, but that doesn't mean that I think that every taxpayer should have to pay for studies related to faith. In the same way, just the example you use, things like gender studies, your right to be passionate about that, to go study it, private institutions' right to go teach it. I don't see that having any sort of value to society that the entire country would want to send their money to.
Just in general, it'd be hard because it would require every single person to set values on what they like or believe in for education. And I think that could be like a slippery slope. You definitely have like, at least knowing, I have some wild family members sometimes, so there's like, I have a family member that doesn't believe in medicine. And it stresses me out sometimes, but does not like any kind of medical intervention at all, and thinks that all doctors are bad and they have their reasons for it. But if they also don't believe in like funding medical education and medicine, how would that go? Or like how would you like be able to like individually like, oh, I believe in faith-based education, but oh, I don't believe in that. I believe in like back and forth. Oh, communication majors seem fairly not like purposeful. Maybe stop funding that.
Well,
like,
it's
go
just
down,
more
like,
broad.
like,
But yeah, here I'll let Cody go and then I'll respond.
I kind of I was like starting to piece together like what would be a hypothetical law. I know this is kind of like a little bit of a take. There's the choice like when you're on your taxes to like send money to like public campaigns. That was something
It's
recently
like $1,
learned
like
about.
$3, yeah.
Right. So I think that sort of like referendum, like kind of like maybe like a checkbox system, like when you're going through your taxes to like, hey, this is some like what I'd like to fund and what I'm cool with. It makes things a little more complicated, obviously, but also like into kind of like there's people who believe crazy things. You got to trust the masses in a way, because the people who believe in medicine will outweigh the people who don't, and those sort of things. That I think overall it'll be fine. But also, once again, it's a slippery slope because we are going to have a lot of people who don't really know a lot about education trying to qualify what education is good.
And people might be looking at majors and they're like, I don't even know what this study is, but it don't sound good to me, and I'm gonna cross it off. So I kind of got two things. This might be less conservative of me, but I actually think that your idea about like selecting where the money goes, I'm actually going to take the more, I guess, I don't know if it's left-leaning side here and say that I actually don't like that. I think that if the majority of people want to fund core majors, and I'll mention that one second, but want to fund core majors, that just is the decision for the state. If the majority of people say we want to do this, then I don't believe that it's one individual's right to decide, no, I don't want my tax money going there. Majority voting kind of is just like, that's just the way it goes. For the medicine thing, kind of like he said, the majority will outweigh. I really doubt that the majority of people would ever make a decision like that. And in a less popular view, if 60% of Georgia, or if a majority of Georgia for some reason doesn't believe in medicine, then I guess that's their right to not fund medical education. I just don't see that ever happening. But I guess my idea would be core subjects, so you could limit it to things that are outside of a subjective view. So you could exclude religious education, more I guess the more woke ideologies, anything that is not beneficial to all, I guess would be my idea.
I was using an exasperated opinion for the medical, but like I feel like funding for the arts would go down incredibly. Like people don't appreciate music and art as much as it is important in society. It has its place. I think, honestly, personally, I think the best thing that they can do is like let the colleges decide like what's an important field of subject, and if it's like the class that's offered in the college, I think they kind of need a hands-off approach and be like, well, we're helping fund a student do something, and that will hopefully do something in the future. Whether or not it's something that the majority believe in, the minority believe in, whether it's like we just have to assume that it's some sort of education that can be useful information. Whether or not you agree with it, you would still know about it.
I just think like a part of the equation I've been thinking that we're kind of just skipping over is that the majority of people that go to college do not finish college. I saw the other day it's something like only 40% are walking away with a degree. Correct me if I'm wrong. but we're funding that. And I also think so much of what students are left with after they graduate is due to their own personal decisions of where they decide to go. Like you were talking about, you made a decision to come here because it's only, $600 or something a semester. And so I feel like a whole nother layer to it is that the people that are choosing to, say, go to the big SEC school in the state next door, are they not receiving on average more funding just because they chose a more expensive school? So then, you know what I'm saying? Like there's so much more to it. So I don't know how we consider that in it as well. But yeah, like I'm an out-of-state student. But if I was responsible for my own tuition, oh my God, I absolutely would not have picked to go out of state. I would have kept my butt in Florida 100%. So I think that's part of the thing. And it's like, if we're asking people, I guess in like states, what they think, but so many people go out of state, it's just a tough equation.
Let me throw something out, just to see how you all react to it. I recently became aware of a college somewhere in the Midwest, Nebraska, Iowa, one of those states, they're all the same, called McPherson College, I believe it is. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. I'm sure it's just private. I doubt very much it's part of the whatever state university it is. But this McPherson College offers a 4-year college degree in classic car restoration. Should students be eligible for support for something like that? What do you think?
You could argue that it's like historical preservation of our culture.
Put that in a referendum if the majority of Nebraska wants those classic cars, and that's their right.
Also, just like cars in general, being able to do like automotive repairs is really useful.
Yes.
Well,
yes, I agree with that. But this was specifically.
That's already paid for. Automotive
Yeah, this
tax
isn't
are
just.
funded.
Yeah, this isn't just servicing automobiles. This is classic cars.
But classic cars are just better than most other cars.
It's a very popular opinion.
All
And
right.
it takes 4 years.
I guess this is like jumping back a little bit, but I think like leave it to the professionals. Like there was this like the idea of the founding fathers. They kind of had not that like every man should vote, but like the people who know should have a say. And I'm not all for that ideology, especially in like general elections. But I think in like education, it really applies. This idea that the professionals and the people who have an understanding of education and the educational system, what's important, should have a say. And so the people, if the professionals have this idea that classic car restoration is something that's like really important and should be protected, then go for it. Because I don't, who is like, are we to say what is important versus not important? I think there's better qualified people for that, not to like put us down. But I don't know.
I think that particular degree is interesting too, because is it like the case where, you take any major here and you're still required for the first 2 years or however many years you spread it out over, those core classes that you're required to take for your major, are they also learning like awesome fundamentals of like how to be a better human in society, or are they just in the garage like,
That's a
squeaking
good
up
question.
the
Now,
shop?
I assume, I don't know anything about this degree. I
Yeah.
just recently came across
Yeah.
it. But I would assume that there are college-wide requirements that everybody has to take,
Yeah.
just like
Because if
you all
that's
have to do here.
if that's the case, I can get behind it a little bit more. Like, I think part of the reason why funding works now is because all majors have those common 2 years worth of classes that you at least know that when you're paying for, or when the government's paying, that they're getting that out of it, if nothing else.
I mean, my point in bringing it up, it gets back to, Anita, what you talked about before in terms of funding for the arts and for art majors, who would work on projects, obviously not the same as restoring a classic car, but in the same vein, a creative project, right? Other issues? Yeah.
I mean, I like the way that Cody described it. There's a reason that we're not a direct democracy. Let the people who know use what they know. It's the same reason that every time our Department of Energy makes a decision, it's not a referendum, because who knows anything about what they're making decisions about? You put people in there that know what they're doing. And so, well, that's paid for by the taxpayer. So that kind of goes against my, what do they want to pay for? But I do think, on a basic level, people know, if what people might not know how to restore a classic car, but they know what classic car restoration can do for them. And so I do think that should still kind of be up to the people.
Well, the idea that we're not a direct democracy is kind of the reason why we had the Department of Education, is for like instances like this, but it got shredded. And so I understand the idea that we don't want a huge bureaucracy overreaching and overstepping in a lot of our boundaries, but we need to have people overlooking and overseeing what's going on, especially when it comes to public funds. You can't just shred the Department of Education when we are spending money on education. And obviously that's more of a political take than what we've been saying, but it is the issue that is like currently at hand with the current administration and their decision making.
Yeah. So from my understanding of the Department of Education, it's not like the Department of Education was doing, the educating. It was more creating, it was a voice for the federal government into education, which to my understanding is supposed to be left to the states. Now I get that there's still funding that comes from the federal government that comes down, but at the end of the day, to my understanding, that should be left to the states. And so I actually don't know enough about what the Department of Education did. You seem frustrated by it. What in your opinion were important things that the Department of Education did that states weren't, that you're upset is now gone, I guess?
So, to bounce off
I
of
just
you,
don't know.
I don't really know enough either. But I'm willing to admit that. From what I do know, is that the states have a lot of say in the education, as they should, because that's where their representation is. But as far as I'm aware, the federal government was focused more on like oversight to make sure that states were kind of acting right and that funding was going equally distributed to a lot of different places, especially like low income areas. I mean, this is as far as I'm aware. And now it's kind of, it's a little bit more of a free-for-all. I think it's kind of, the purpose was to kind of pick up the slack where the states were lacking a little bit, especially if we're thinking about like lower funded states such as like West Virginia and Mississippi. The federal government was picking up a lot of slack there. So it really is just going to like further the divide between like the educated and the uneducated, where you have like well-funded states like here in Georgia or California or Florida, where people are getting like pretty good education, versus very poor states like West Virginia and Mississippi.
Yeah, just a quick thing then, I guess. I guess that comes down to, do you trust states to do it on their own? And even if you don't trust them to, do you think that it's their right to? Because, for example, Louisiana, who historically was at almost the bottom of the barrel in the 50 states for education, and they've been making a massive comeback even without the Department of Education. Now, in doing that, they've also made some decisions that have angered people around the nation. Their decisions around critical race theory, what can be talked about gender in school. They pretty much took that out, and so some people are upset, some people weren't. But I guess the idea is, one, if that's representative of what the people in Louisiana want, is that the right of the people in Louisiana? And then also, if they can make that comeback without the federal government, what was the federal government doing? I guess I'm always going to be smaller government. I'm always going to want the states to do it and have the idea, if you don't like what your state's doing, either run for office or move to a different state. Is kind of my thing. Like, I think it's California's right to do a lot of things I don't agree with. That's California. I just choose not to move there.
I think the main worry is just that if there's not oversight to where we're seeing like equal education, same thing being taught in same place in different places, then you get those disparities that people are worried about. Because when you take away the like federal government's oversight, any state can teach anything, and it can even vary by county. Should one county be getting a different education than another county? And then also the funding for like block grants. A lot of places, especially rural places, rely on those block grant fundings from the federal government, because block grants don't necessarily say like, oh, you have to teach this, oh, you have to do that. It's just them getting the funding to hopefully use it for whatever the school needs. If they're pulling that funding, will they be able to continue to have like a multitude of different programs? So that's a worry for both students and teachers. Will they be able to reach the qualifications that they feel like they need to, especially for like special ed education? They're very much worried right now, because if their funding gets cut, that means that they're not able to provide for their students as well. Also on that same idea, there's those exasperated states that could very much take a very big turn in education. I think honestly most of the 50 states wouldn't do that. I would be worried about Florida. Just saying, would be worried about Florida. There has been counties in Florida that have tried to remove the teaching of dinosaurs because it is anti-theological. If you've ever
I'm generally
mentioned
worried
that.
about Florida in a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
Not just
I feel like
education.
at the very least federal oversight needs to be in Florida. No offense.
No, I
think
agree.
I think you're a great Florida person.
Thanks.
You don't.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I definitely see both sides here, because do I think that, let's say Florida just for their education and on like a good day, and Georgia just because they're doing good, so I guess they kind of get to retain control more so of what's being taught, versus just because West Virginia sucks. Now Georgia and Florida aren't getting any money, West Virginia is getting money, and the federal government has a say where the states do here. So I think you kind of have the disparity regardless of whether the federal government is stepping in the places where the states are lacking. But also, we're talking about literal children, at times special need children. So the other option is not like pull all of West Virginia's federal funding and let them suffer, you know? That's not the option. We have to like prioritize human life, children especially at the end of the day, and their well-being in life.
We're like really trying to bounce around and like try to find like a factual like middle ground, but like there is an issue with a lot of times it comes down to like political opinion, especially when we're looking at like what should and shouldn't be funded, because it does go down to like federal funding. Should we apply federal funding for schools that aren't going to teach about dinosaurs, or should the federal government step in and say you must teach about dinosaurs? And that really is like up to like the personal and political opinions of the individuals, and so that does once again it leads to a slippery slope of like who is to decide that. Just kind of like running in circles almost. Like we've kind of come to the understanding that like funding and oversight is needed, in that like we need to care for the kids obviously, but who's to decide what is caring for the kids? Like what does that qualify? And so do we leave that to the government, or do we leave that to the individual? What is the solution? I guess like I want to hear y'all's proposals.
Yeah, you can go. I also
Just
have
like
one.
also to like continue kind of what was being like cut too. It wasn't just ideological based. It was things like also like free lunch programs are being cut from the federal government, which means that now relies on the states. Well, some states can provide that and do well with that, but if you're in a lower income, especially a lot of things are done by county. If you are in a lower income county, does that mean that you won't be able to provide those things for those students because that county's not being able to raise enough? That's when the state would step in, but even if the state steps in, would they still be able to provide those programs? And that's like a lot of people's worries when you see like funding cut from education. It's not just because of like gender studies being taught, it's things like that also gets affected.
Yeah, I guess the proposal that I would have is that the federal government, if they truly just objectively care about the well-being of the children, then they would send funding regardless of curriculum, with the only stipulation that a certain amount of it goes to special education. I was part of a very well-funded school district when I lived up in Illinois, and the special ed programs were fantastic. The kids that needed help had one-on-one, a full-time employee only for them all day, every single day, and I completely support it. I'd send my tax money to that any day and every day. But I believe, whether or not you agree with what the curriculum is, I think it's the state's right to determine the curriculum, and that if the majority of people in Florida think it's ridiculous that things like dinosaurs aren't being taught in schools, then the majority of people in Florida should vote someone in that puts it back in. That majority could be applied to the country as well. This was done in the EU, where the majority of people in this country think this, everyone else thinks that's ridiculous. Well, that's that country's right, and if that country doesn't want that, then we'll vote someone in who doesn't want that, I guess is the idea.
I think there's a way to figure this out. We can focus federal funding on objective things, to make sure that the schools are clean, to make sure that there's a roof over these kids' heads, to make sure that they have food in their belly. Special needs programs. There's so many things that are very objectively the moral thing to do, and then we can kind of leave curriculum funding and those sorts of things down to the states. Just kind of a redistribution of what we prioritize when it comes to federal funding, because there is to an extent there is an objective right and wrong on how to help kids, in that curriculum is honestly lower on the totem pole compared to special needs programs or
lunches
or lunches for students who can't afford it. There are the objective solutions.
Okay, over here.
I agree with what you're saying, but you also have to kind of look at it from a realistic perspective, where it's and I'm sure you've seen videos of this online, of a lot of parents just fed up with their school boards, their local school boards that they elected, and they're having a problem with the curriculum, but they can't do anything about it because that person's already elected, and therefore they have control of all that kind of stuff. And by the time that the next election rolls around and they vote somebody else in, to them the damage is already done to their kids. Their kids have already learned or been taught certain things that they don't want to know about, that they don't want their kids to know about.
Are you talking about the examples of some couple crazy examples I saw? There was near pornographic material and children's
but even
books
just curriculum things, or just it happens everywhere, And I'm not saying it could be more left or right material, conservative or liberal material. It's just on both ends. It's once parents can get fed up with it, but they can't do anything about it until the next election. By then, it's their kids not even going to that school anymore.
Yeah, I guess my solution to that would be not only retain states' power over the federal government, but the state should exercise more power over the school boards in saying what they can and can't teach, which I guess some states have already started doing. The reason that I see the state as the solution is that it's because there's 50 of them. Pick one that supports yours, and but it's also large enough where it's a large enough sample of people that you wouldn't end up with those things, I guess is what I see.
Okay, Anita, why don't you take us out?
Well, thank y'all for coming for the last meeting. That was actually a very passionate discussion about two different topics. So thank y'all for coming and talking, and I hope to see y'all next semester. Y'all have good finals. Good luck for everybody. I got this. Happy holidays. Thank you, Anita.
Good luck with those grades and that Cavalli class with those projects.
Make sure you put the chairs back in the classrooms you got them from. Okay?